It's been 4 years to the month since this happened. I was 36 at the time and had been with my wife Chrissy 35F for 15 years, married for 12. We lived a comfortable upper middle class life and had a 14-year-old daughter. I had two best friends that I had met in college. Eric and Mike. Eric 34M was married to Emily 30F and Mike 34M had gotten divorced from his wife that spring. Through us, Chrissy and Emily had become best friends as well. As a group of 3 couples we had been taking a week-long vacation every summer for a few years at this point. Everything was booked and ready when I broke my ankle 3 days before our travel date. Because of this I decided to not go on the trip, as 1, I was non-weight bearing for 16 weeks, 2, my meds made me extremely tired and sleepy, and 3, I just didn't want to be a burden to everyone else's fun. My wife offered to stay home with me several times but I convinced her to go ahead and go on the trip. Thus, due to divorce and my ankle, the trip ended up just being Chrissy, Eric, Emily, and Mike. D-Day happened on December 7, 2019. Chrissy and Emily had planned a girls' shopping weekend a couple hours away, with a hotel on Saturday night. They got caught because of the Snapchat map thing. That night, after sending my wife a snap of the dog, I flipped to the map only to notice that Mike was in the exact same location as her. There was no reason for Mike to be in that city at all. My mind immediately went to the worst and I began to furiously blow up my wife's phone with calls and texts, but was completely ignored. Knowing Emily should be there as well, I called Eric to see where she was. I told him what I had seen and that I was about to make the drive to confront them, and asked if Emily had made the trip. In the saddest voice he said yes, Chrissy picked her up that morning, and he knew that Mike would be there. For a moment I felt relief. It sounded like Mike and Emily were having an affair and my wife was just a cover. But then he said, they're having a trio. I went totally numb, but he continued to talk and said, I'm sorry, it's not the first time she's been with Mike either, and I've been with her too. My numbness ceased and was replaced by rage. I cussed out and threatened Eric before finally hanging up. I had totally snapped, broke a few things around the house, screamed and cursed everyone. My daughter came out clearly afraid and concerned. She had never seen me like that, and I was hobbling around as I had only been cleared for walking 3 or 4 weeks earlier. Upon seeing her I pulled it together, reassured her, apologized, told her everything was fine, and that I only freaked out because of a work thing. I'm sure she knew that was all. She isn't dumb. Once she went back to her room, I retreated to mine and called Eric. He picked up right away. I told him he better tell me everything right now. He said he wouldn't leave anything out. It started with the vacation back in July. It was basically 5 days, with a travel day on each end. The first day was largely just a chill day around the pool at the Airbnb. It was day 2 when things started to happen. I knew a full outing had been planned that day. Without their spouses, Mike and Chrissy kind of naturally paired off, seeing as they were with a married couple. It all seemed innocent enough and just friendly. But they seemed to get more comfortable as the day went on. That night was a pretty heavy drinking night with dinner back at the B&B. Through dinner and after the drinking continued, Emily noticed how much flirtier and closer Chrissy and Mike were getting. After a while Eric and Emily went to their room and left Mike and Chrissy alone. After about an hour, Emily decided to quietly venture out to see what became of them. She went by Chrissy's room only to find she wasn't there. She then crept up to Mike's room to hear the clear distinct sounds of sex between 2 drunk people trying to keep it down. Emily came back to the room and told Eric what was going on. I interrupted him at this point and said how could she just let this happen? You said she noticed them getting like this during dinner, why didn't she pull Chrissy aside and intervene? This is where the story went from bad to just totally effed. Apparently, Eric and Emily had been having marital strife themselves for some time, which included a lot of bedroom issues. She had been asking for an open for roughly 6 months at this point. He had finally caved but asked if they could try swinging first. It was their plan to ask Chrissy and I to swing with them on the trip, but when I broke my ankle and didn't go, they figured it was a moot point. So when Chrissy and Mike had their drunken indiscretion, Emily figured maybe the swinging could be back on. The next morning Emily went to talk to Chrissy about it. She said Chrissy had the expected guilt, and extreme worry about being found out especially since there were witnesses. She said it was a huge mistake, but also that it was really good, especially for drunk sex. Emily said why stop? He just got divorced, you have been on edge because of work for a year now, we're on vacation and nothing came with you, not your job, not Chuck, that's me, not Cora, our daughter, you left your whole life behind, consider it a free week. Eric and I won't say a thing, and we'll cover if anything comes up. Eric told me she apparently liked the sound of it but had apprehension. She went to talk to Mike, and then Mike came to Eric asking if they were for real about letting this happen. Eric said yes, he had been coached up by Emily as to what to say, and told him to just get it out over the next few days. You both deserve a real vacation from everything, and when we go back it all just goes back to normal and Chuck will never know. I was ready to throw up hearing this. The betrayal of my wife and my 2 closest friends hit like an anvil. My head was spinning, I was so angry and hurt at the same time. But I needed to know the whole deal. He said over the next 3 days they stuck to all the plans for the trip. I know this to be true because all the expected IG and Facebook posts went up. I kept getting included in the group snap from everyone, and Chrissy would call twice a day to check in, with intermittent texts throughout the day. I suspected absolutely nothing while back home recovering. Update 1. He said those last 3 days Mike and Chrissy basically acted like a newly dating couple. They made sure on outings that any pics/posts/snaps were innocent. But they held nothing back in terms of holding hands or kissing while out, and whenever they got back to the B&B it was almost always immediately to Mike's bed. They were not quiet about it, it was very evident what they were doing and for how long. He said on the 4th night they didn't even close the door. On the 5th day Emily enacted her plan. Eric doesn't know what was said but she got her to agree to the swap. Mike did say something to Eric, and Eric just said yeah it's what he wanted. It wasn't, but he had totally caved to Emily's pressure by this point. That night he was with Chrissy, he said they did have sex among other things, and he tried to get into it but was preoccupied knowing Emily was with Mike down the hall. He said Chrissy put on a good show but he knows she wasn't really satisfied. He said the part that really stung his ego was she went back to her room, while Emily spent the whole night with Mike. In the morning he overheard Chrissy say, "You owe me one," to Emily right when she got up. That was the day they traveled back. All silently swearing to take it to the grave. I remember Chrissy getting home and immediately coming to check on me and acting like she was so excited to see me. I realize now that she was doing what betrayed spouses call love bombing. This went on for weeks and I should have known something was up. We had a good relationship, but she was so attentive and caring and loving for several weeks upon return. I always thought it was just guilt from leaving me behind with my broken ankle and just feeling refreshed from the vacation. I guess it was really guilt from the cheating. Eric went on to say as soon as they got back from vacation Emily was dead set on the open relationship now. There was no other option. Eric agreed and they landed on some ground rules. First and foremost everything was to be all access. Messages, conversations, everything. I asked why the hell would he want all that if he hated the idea of her effing other guys? He said he asked for that because her first rule was no limits. He wanted to have a list of people who were no-go and she said no. This was about being open sexually and they couldn't do that if people were off limits. It was gonna be the same for both of them so he should be fine with it. If he wanted to try and F her sister he could. And she didn't want coworkers, exes, anyone off her list either. He agreed on the stipulation he knows everything, and has access to everything. He said he did this to collect evidence for his eventual divorce. She resisted at first but when he said he'd expose what happened on vacation she caved. At this point he asked if I wanted all the messages he had. The vast majority of stuff was his wife with other men. Coworkers, randoms, she had been busy. But there were plenty of messages between Chrissy and Emily. I picked up that Emily and Mike had started a regular affair about 4 months earlier. About 1 month ago the conversation of the trio started. That whole time after the vacation Chrissy had been really good to me, and seemed much happier than before. In the beginning of the convo she stuck to the idea that what happened on vacation was it. It was vacation from reality, and now it was over and life would just go on like normal. About 2 weeks in she started to show some interest at Emily's encouragement. This is when Mike entered the conversation too. Chrissy agrees at this point and the plan comes to be. In addition, Eric had a photo of Chrissy and Mike kissing, and a recording of him having sex with her. The son of a tramp had sneakily recorded it, not the best quality vid but he did manage to get a clear shot of her face and tattoo. I thanked him for the evidence, then told him he was piece of CR, and after we had our divorces, he better never effing contact me again. Update 2, Chrissy went radio silent for my first frantic call until she walked in the door at 7 p.m. on Sunday night. She looked beyond nervous and scared. She already knew I was aware of everything. Eric had left Emily a voicemail telling her he gave me everything, told me everything, that he wouldn't be there when she got home, and she needed to sign the divorce papers on the kitchen table. I told Chrissy to get her seat together. Cora came out a moment later and for a couple hours we pretended to have a normal Sunday night. Once she went to bed, I asked Chrissy what she wanted. She immediately broke down in tears and tried to hug me. I blocked the advance and she began apologizing profusely and begging for forgiveness. I told her to save it, we had a lot to talk about. I wanted every question answered 100% honestly. If I thought she was lying I would end the conversation here and file for divorce on Monday. I had tons of evidence and she wouldn't be able to get C out of me, we are not in a no-fault state. Then I pointed out that she didn't answer my question. I wanted to know what she wants. She said she wanted to show me how sorry she was, she wanted to work for forgiveness, and for us to work past this. I told her I didn't think that was possible, but would let her explain herself. I asked why she cheated in the first place. She said she had a lot of fun that day, was feeling good and relaxed. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. Work had been so stressful for so long. She let the moment, the drinks, take over and just went with it. She tried telling me how terrible she felt after but I cut her off. I wanted to know why she kept doing it. It was a totally honest answer. She wanted to and could. Yes, Emily did get in her head a bit, but also she justified it to herself by saying she had already cheated once. What was the difference at this point? The next part was hard to hear as she described what kind of things they did, as it was a total when in Rome thing. Some of it she hadn't done to me in years. I asked if she was unhappy in our relationship and she said no. She said we have a good marriage, she just wanted to feel wild, feel excited. We had gotten somewhat monotonous and this experience was exhilarating. Her plan had been to have this much sex with me, but when I didn't go she at first thought well that's out, but once it was available she let herself get taken by the moment. I then asked about the swapping. She said that was a huge mistake. Emily had talked to her about that on the last full day, and about how they were trying it, and she thought this was even better than Chrissy and I. Emily said it's perfect because she isn't even giving up Chuck, just Mike for one night. She knew Emily complained about sex with Eric and voiced that concern. Emily claimed Eric was doing a lot better in this department, but also kind of flipped the table saying she needed this badly too, and since she was going to cover for Chrissy, this was a great way to repay her. I asked about the trio. Asked why she planned that. Chrissy said she never intended to step out of line again, and swore she was going to make the most of our relationship going forward. This would explain the weeks of love bombing upon her return. She had been talking with Emily like usual, and she just seemed like she was having the time of her life now that she was open. Chrissy admitted to being a little jealous. Emily had been with several men and Chrissy was living a bit vicariously through her. When Emily started the affair with Mike she knew what she was missing, and became more jealous. For the record I know Mike had a rep in college for being a ladies' man, and if I'm being honest was the best looking of the three of us. He had managed to stay the most fit as he aged and it only improved that post-divorce. Chrissy said when the trio got proposed she really tried to stay strong and not get drawn in, but as the weeks went on she found herself just thinking about that. She told me she caved because Mike was really good, she had never had a trio, and honestly thought she could get away with it. At that point she asked how I figured it out, and I said I didn't have to answer that. I asked why she didn't come right home once she knew I was onto her. She said because, we were just going to do this. I knew this was coming. Is there really a difference between me staying and continuing the segs I planned and running home right away? The end results are the same. I asked her if there was anything else and she said no, she just wanted a chance to earn trust, forgiveness, and to reconcile. I said no, I don't want this anymore, I am hurt, betrayed, and can't stand to look at her. I was going to file for divorce the very next day. Update 3, when I woke Chrissy was still home, she usually was on her way to the office but had taken the day off, anticipating I had done the same thing. Once Cora was off to school, she began her love bombing. I told her I didn't care, I'd already seen all this before. She said she had one more proposal for me. All access to her, all of her stuff, all the time, marriage counseling, she would go to individual counseling, cut off Emily permanently, and she would be an open book at all times for any questions. I said those are just things you do when you are trying to reconcile. I don't want to be a warden at home and I don't want to reconcile. She begged and pleaded, and asked that I just wait a week, just a week, and if next Monday I still felt the same she would sign no matter what, no contest. I ended up agreeing to the 1-week trial. She continued to love bomb and consistently tried initiating sex. I rejected these usual efforts, and on Thursday told her I was not moved in any way and still planned to file on Monday. Friday after work I could tell she had something in mind. I really didn't care, I was literally counting the hours until I could be rid of her at this point. The love bombing was not working, and I was actually getting annoyed with her overzealous efforts. She said she thought we couldn't go on because of the imbalance that her infidelity had caused. I wasn't sure at first if she was implying what I thought she was implying, but she was. Chrissy said we should have a trio. I said you did more than that. She said okay, and you can have a week off marriage. I pointed out that was worthless, she's as a woman, if she wanted she could go out right now and find a guy to F that very moment. I'm a guy, and unless you're a rich guy or a famous guy, you're not picking up women that easily. There's no point in me sitting in bars for a week or on dating apps not getting matches. She said okay, you can have 10 hall passes that never expire instead. That can be the same woman or 10 different. I replied you think that's not gonna impact our sexy life, you're gonna be okay with that? Because I doubt it. She said she won't let it suffer, she will make a huge effort to be available for my needs, and we can do any of the things I've ever wanted. I told her I needed to think about it. In retrospect, I realized that what I did next was pretty sleazy. I should have walked away and started over. But I didn't. I told myself why not. Here was a trio on the table, here was any fantasy I had on the table, and could use the 10 hall passes to find someone else to move on with. And when it was over I would still divorce her all the same. She had wronged me and in my mind cashing in on these offers was totally justified revenge. I said I agreed, but I wanted the trio to be soon. I said she needed to have at least someone agreeing by February 1st or I was out, because if she couldn't that meant she wasn't trying and had just been out to buy herself time. I don't know how she found the girl but in the week between Christmas and New Year's she showed me a picture of a girl from her spin class. She was gorgeous, and I couldn't believe she found someone that quick and someone so attractive. Tiffany was 25 years old. Her and Chrissy had been chatting at spin for months, but nothing past regular small talk. I asked how, and Chrissy just said she had her ways. My assumption was she offered her a few $100s. About 2 weeks later was the big night. I did something out of spite though, and it's kind of weird. I didn't act selfish. I had been on Reddit for years at this point and had read several trio stories and advice threads where one partner, usually a woman in a FFM, feels left out, as their partner focuses on the new person. I made it a point to make sure she was included in the whole thing, insisted on Tiffany and I be focused on my wife, talked to her throughout, complimented her, etc. I mean, I still had my fun with Tiffany, but I knew this would make Chrissy think we were on the right track. I wasn't wrong. She told me how she only did this to try and win me back, but that the whole experience was amazing, and she couldn't believe that it really did make her feel like we had a stronger connection. Prior to that, I had been cashing in on her obligation of being overtly sexual with me. After the trio, it stopped feeling like she was just meeting an obligation. She seemed excited to be with me and to try new things. Although, I think a part of it was her hope that I would abandon the hall passes. Update 4. Mid-February I took the first plunge into using the hall passes. There was a 27-year-old restaurant manager, Sabrina, close by my work. I had frequented it often and always thought she was a little flirty with me. I asked her out and lied. I told her I was 2 months into my divorce proceedings. I said we were still living in the same house but that I had moved into the basement, another lie. Sabrina seemed hesitant but agreed to the date. Later on I asked her what made her agree knowing my situation, and she said she noticed the first time I came in without my wedding ring, I took it off on D-Day, and since by the time I asked her my tan line was fading away, it meant I wasn't just taking it off to meet women, but not wearing it at all. It wasn't too far after that the COVID shutdown began to hit. At that point I felt stuck, but I used it as an excuse to not start marriage counseling. Chrissy had been insistent on this, but I always said I wouldn't until after the trio. Then I said I wouldn't until after I went on a date, and soon as that happened shutdown started. By April I had seen Sabrina 7 times. We went on 2 actual dates that really tore Chrissy up before the shutdowns. Once those started I just began going over to Sabrina's apartment, as she lived alone. Needless to say our relationship turned physical. At this point I was tired of pretending to reconcile. I also think I had hurt Chrissy enough she was too. I still feel heavy guilt for this today. When I said it didn't work, and I still wanted to divorce, she didn't fight me. She was sad, she seemed defeated. I found a small 2-bedroom house and left Chrissy in our family home. The one stand-up thing I can say I did in all this was sit Cora down and tell her the absolute truth. I told her the whole story from the beginning, her mom's infidelity, and my sleazy behavior after. I wanted her to know both of her parents were wrong. We both loved her, and wanted the best, but we both wronged each other too deeply. The 3 of us decided that 50-50 custody was best, so she alternated week to week staying at each other's place. It took until January of 2021 for the divorce to go final. I dated Sabrina the entire time. Cora and her got along fine. I was happy Cora didn't see her as the other woman or anything. They never had a step-parent vibe or anything, but were friendly in the way a child is with their parents' friends. My relationship with Sabrina lasted until January of this year. It ended because I don't want to marry again, or have more children. Chrissy had done some sporadic dating over the last couple years, one guy she was with for about 11 months. Then things got weird. We have co-parented pretty effectively through all this. The one thing we both wanted was to be there for our daughter. We've been amicable through all of her events and for her sake. Then her HS graduation happened this past May. We ended up sitting by each other. What should have been awkward, just wasn't. We started joking around, talking, got a little flirty. It was refreshing. A week later, I was still thinking of the fun I had at graduation. I decided to call Chrissy and ask her out. She said, absolutely not. This caused quite the swell of embarrassment. Luckily that was only temporary. After a long pause, she continued, unless we go to marriage counseling. I agreed. We had our first session on a Thursday, and our second first date on Friday. We are still doing counseling. We decided on a counselor that specializes in ENM, as that was something we both want to explore. It's been 6 months, we've started to talk about me moving back into our original family home. Cora can't believe we are getting back together, and says it's weird. She told me when she got back from her first semester at college last week that she wasn't sure if she was happy or concerned. But knows for sure she doesn't want any details of any kind in regards to our exploits. Eric divorced Emily and ran for the hills. He put in a work transfer and now lives 4 states away. Mike and Emily tried to make a real relationship work for a while after her divorce. Chrissy got back in contact with Emily after hours, and learned that pretty much sex was the only thing they had in common, and it fizzled out pretty quick. Emily remarried a guy that used to work with Eric, and moved with him when he was promoted to a regional manager spot. He is now Eric's direct boss, and keeps blocking his transfers. I find this the most hilarious irony I have ever heard. Mother effer Mike, as I refer to him, is still around, and still single. I wish him only the worst. Well, that's my story. One day I hope to give a happy ending update, but I guess only time will tell. P.S. Chrissy paid Tiffany $250 for the trio. Happy holidays.